Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments.
Very excited today. We have Dr. Elia Gorgaris with us, also known as America's Happiness Doctor. And he is the author of the #1 best-selling Amazon book, 7 Paths to Lasting Happiness, which has been translated into 5 languages. He co-authored the highly acclaimed book, 7 Keys to Navigating a Crisis, a practical guide to emotionally dealing with pandemics and other disasters. You know, his message is featured in respected publications and media around the world. He is a weekly contributor to the Mental Health Television Network. With his positive psychology background, he has helped thousands of people, both in their careers and in their relationships, to achieve success and a better work-life integration. As an inspirational speaker, he frequently presents at international conferences focused on happiness, corporate wellness, and mental health. He's the host of a new TV show called The Happy Hour with Dr. Elia. I am so happy to have him with us today on the show, and I know that you all are going to feel the same way as well. Hi, and welcome to leadershipmomentspodcast.com. I am here with a very special guest today, Dr. Elia Gorgaris. And I cannot even tell you all how excited I am to have him on the show. Dr. Elia, it's so great to have you with us today. And I'm so looking forward for our audience to actually hear what you have to say. I know that I've thoroughly enjoyed our interactions and our conversations. They've always been so deep and meaningful to me. And I know that our audience is going to benefit from that today.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Tracy-Ann. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So I'm gonna dive right in. All right.
Let's go. Let's do it. All right.
I want to talk with you a little bit about. So first of all, for those of you in the audience who may not know yet, Dr. Elia Gorgaris just got his TV network show, which we are really excited about, and he is known as Dr. Happy, the Happiness Doctor. So the first question that I wanted to ask you, because I actually don't even know the story to this, is how did that come about?
You know, I think happiness has been a part of my my life since the very, very beginning. Believe it or not, the seed was planted on the very first day I was born. I know that sounds like a tall story, like he's got to be making this up. But I was born a long time ago in Athens, Greece. You know, back in the day, there was no Instagram Live, there were no cameras, there was no nothing. It was just like, my mom giving birth and her OBGYN, basically.
Yeah.
So as the story was told, me growing up in my home, my dad, kind of a tough Greek guy, on the outside anyways, cigarette drinking and, classic Greek guy, shows up and asks the nurse, there were like 4 or 5 like babies all wrapped up in the same white generic blanket back then. They all look the same. So he comes up to this little window and goes, "Which one's my son?" And I guess at that point I had a smile on my face. So the nurse turns to my dad, "Your son, he's the happy one." So now growing up in my home, it's like, well, you came out of the womb happy. You're like the happy kid. That's it. So, obviously, so I was branded unofficially as the happy one. And I kind of lived, that way growing up. Now, fast forward 25 years. Now I'm in graduate school getting my PhD in clinical psychology. And our professor is sharing with us, how are we made? Our makeup, how are we, and he's like, is it our genetic DNA, predisposition, or is it the environment? What contributes to our personalities? And of course, the truth is that they both have, play a role. But as he was sharing that, I remember this as it was yesterday. Like, I'm like, wait a minute. What if my dad gets stuck in traffic, shows up like 15 minutes later than he did, comes up the same window, same nurse, asks the same question, which one is my son? At that point, like I have like stomach pain or whatever, and I'm crying and I'm screaming my head off, and my face is all red. And the nurse turned to my dad and goes, "Your son? He's the cranky one." And I'm raised in this family like, you came out of the womb cranky, you miserable little beep. You know what
That's
I mean? That's
funny.
like, why do I share this story? Because we've all been branded, officially, unofficially, and so on. And we go back.
Mm,
It happens in our home, but sometimes it can happen, in school. Kids say things to us, and maybe bullying too. A lot of negative. Some brands, by the way, are very positive. Obviously, the happy one is like the top of the list, I think. But there are other ones. The creative one, the artistic one, the beautiful, cute, adorable princess, athletic, all those brands are great. Kind, loving, and so on, right? Great brands. But in my experience as a clinical psychologist for 18 years in private practice, and then as a coach and traveling the world and speaking to thousands and thousands of people, unfortunately, far too many people have grown up with brands that are not only negative, some of them are just horrific. And I will share with you the three most common, and I know it's hard to believe, but trust me, the three most, I would say, negative in a lot of ways and impactful are the ugly one, the
mm,
stupid one, or the fat one.
mm.
Now, you might say, "Who in the world would actually say that to their kids?" But it happens all the time.
Yeah,
So the
yeah,
call to action to your audience, of course, is if you like your brand, count your blessings. Like, thank God I like I've leaned into my brand my whole life. But if you don't like your brand, and by the way, if it was negative, that's somebody else's projection.
mm,
It's not true.
mm,
But if you hear it enough times, especially when you're young, you tend to internalize that, and then the inner critic comes in and
mm.
compounds the problem. So fast forward now, the Seven Paths to Lasting Happiness book comes out. I start talking about personal branding and so on, and I have a conference in North Carolina, a women's conference, 500 women and me, and I'm sharing the story with the audience. And again, to empower the audience, said, listen, if you don't like your brand, today's your day to change your brand now as an adult. Like
Yeah.
take charge of your life and change your brand. So as I'm sharing this story, this older lady off to the side stands up and starts waving her arms, and it's very distracting. So the audience is looking at her, I'm looking at her, they're looking at me, and it kind of throws me off, right? I'm doing my thing, and I've never had that happen. So I couldn't ignore it. Is the bottom line. So at some point, I turned to her, and her name was Leah, by the way, which is there's a reason for her first name. And I'm like, yes, ma'am. She goes, and this is in front of 500 people. I don't know if I would have the courage to share what she shared in front of everybody else. I mean, I give her so much credit to Leah. She goes, after listening to you, I'm 70 plus. I already know. So for 7 decades, I've had this, and she had all three of them: ugly, fat, stupid, and a couple of f bombs to go on top of that. So when she shares that, it gets so quiet you could hear a pin drop in the audience.
Wow.
They're looking at me. They're like, "How's she going to handle that?" I've never come across anything like this before in my talks. You kind of, I was taken aback a little bit at first, but really proud of her for actually sharing what she shared because I think that's very powerful. So at some point, I'm like, "Okay, well, ma'am, okay, well, what would you like your new brand to be?" And she goes, "Well, from now on," and she kind of like puffed up a little bit, and with pride. And she goes, "Well, from now on, I want to be known as Princess Leia, kind of like Princess Leia from the Star Wars."
Yeah, yeah.
At which point, no, it was beautiful. Well, that's why I love her name too. At which point, I turned around and I went like this: "Yes, Your Majesty." I bowed down, and everybody cracked up. People are starting to laugh, and a very sensitive moment became a very lighthearted moment.
Yeah.
And of course, I went on with my talk. Why do I share this story? Because if Leah in her 70s can change her brand and take ownership of however many years she has left in her life, then I think anybody else can do it as well. So the call to action immediately is if you like your brand, count your blessing. If you don't like your brand, change it and do it today. There's no more days to procrastinate, making this shift. So growing up, I got my undergraduate degree at UCLA. It was in psychology. I was always interested in helping people. That's been at my core, at my very core. And I think what was pivotal early on in my life, when I was 5 years old, this is still in Greece. We moved to Santa Monica in California when I was 10. But my grandfather, Elia, whose name I carry and I honor, gave me one of the biggest gifts. And
Mm.
he passed away when I was 6, so I don't have a lot of memories of him other than I remember he was a very gentle man. He was just a sweet man, just very loving. So when I was 5 years old, I was sitting on his lap. He kind of leaned over, kind of just, "Do you want to know a secret?" And I'm like, "Yes, Grandpa." Like, he goes, "Do you want to be the richest man in the world?" I'm like, "Yes, Grandpa." Like, now my ears are like, Bugs Bunny, like my ears are like this big. He goes, "If you want to be the richest man in the world, do something good for
Mm.
somebody else every day, and you'll be the richest man in the world." End quote. Now, somehow, the simplicity of that message, my 5-year-old little brain started repeating that. Do something good for somebody else every day, and I'll be the richest man in the world. Obviously, at the age of 5, richness to me meant like, some kind of Pirates of the Caribbean, gold and silver and loot, right? I mean, obviously, that's my brain back then. But
Yeah.
as I've gotten older, I recognize the wisdom in
Yeah.
what he said. So for me, kindness, which is one of the 7 paths to happiness, of course, in doing something good for somebody else every day has been part of who I am, and it comes naturally, effortlessly. It's second nature. I don't even have to think about it. And how do you do that? With a compliment, a hug, a smile, a good word for somebody else. It doesn't take a lot of time. It certainly doesn't take any resources. If you go to the store and somebody's helping you out and you look at their name tag, and what does it take to say, "Thank you, Tracy-Ann. I really appreciate your help." And they light up immediately because you call them by their name. They're not some faceless, person that you just like ignore, basically. "Thank you so much for your help." And you make their day. That literally lasts less than 5 seconds. And you've made a deposit into somebody else's good life. So for me, I wrote the book on happiness. Obviously became a number 1 bestseller, which was to my surprise, been translated in 4 or 5 languages, and I began to speak outside of the United States as a result of that. Around the world about happiness and wellness. So, my wife, we've been together for 33 years, and she's like, "How do you love so many people so big, so many people?" And honestly, it's easy. It's easy to love people,
Yeah.
and I feel like I have some, I think, God-given gifts. One of them is the ability to see the best in people long before they can see it in themselves,
Yeah.
and then to help them to see what I see. Initially, especially when I was in private practice as a psychologist, I worked with a lot of addicts who would come in and say, "Hey, my name is George, and I'm an addict," because they were desperate, right? And I'm like, "Well, George, you're not just an addict. You're a husband, you're a father, you're a friend. You have your professional role, your career. You're a brother, you're you know a son to somebody, a cousin. There's so many other roles you play. Yes, you do have an addiction that is self-destructive, and it's destroying your relationships and your work, and we'll deal with that. But you're so much more than that. That was my whole point initially,
Mhm.
and eventually, when you love somebody unconditionally when they come in, especially when they share stuff that they've never shared before with anybody else. I can't tell you how many people have said, "Dr. Elia, you know more things than my spouse. You know things that my parents never knew. You know things." And I'm like, I would just love it and accept them just as who they are. That's it. And it comes easy, you know? So that helps heal them. And eventually they get to view themselves through the eyes how I see them. And I think that's been a gift. And I'm so grateful for that gift, to be able to see what's good in other people. Um, and so that's kind of a long answer to how I became the happiness doctor. It's something that's in my DNA, honestly.
Yeah.
I believe that with all my heart.
Yeah.
It's easy, which doesn't mean that I've had tragedies in my life. I'll share with you too. I've had things that haven't worked out just like anybody else. There's ups and downs. But overall, I have a big picture perspective. Like these too shall pass,
Yes.
right now for sure. And it feels bad and but this too shall pass. Because
Yeah.
we're all graduates from the University of Adversity. All of
Absolutely.
us.
Absolutely. For sure. And I want to talk about that a little bit. So, just a couple of things that you've said that really resonates with me. First of all, in my home, my husband calls me Mahaba, which means it's African, meaning overflowing with love. Okay,
Wow.
and
Really?
yes, and so it's something we certainly share. I believe, in terms of our philosophy about life and how we show up, and our generosity to others and our kindness and our love to others. But in saying that, you said some really profound things. Uh, Kindness, love is contagious.
Isn't it though? So true.
The way you showed up as a clinical psychologist in helping people believe in themselves, right? It's one of the fundamentals of life. When people don't believe in themselves, that's, when they go to addictions and other things. The branding piece, right? Um, if you're going to change your branding, when are you going to change it? I mean, just you bring out that in people when you are like that. And that is one of the things I know I felt the first time that we spoke, was just this sort of, not only this kindred spirit, but someone who was wise just about how to deal with life in general, right? How do you cope? How do you deal? And I know you've got so many stories around that. I do want you to share one that for me uh, really resonated. You have your book, but you speak about these 7 traits, these 7 kinds of people, right? And at that point in time, when you wrote the book, right, you wrote it around um, a time where we had COVID and was talking about crisis and adversity. But really, I don't think it was just around, it's life. It's the way we look at life, we deal with life. So can you just share with our audience just a little bit about what you were speaking about, the traits, the kinds of people?
Yeah, and now you're talking about the second one, which was the 7 keys to navigating a crisis, which was about how to emotionally deal with pandemics and other disasters. First book to market in the world. I co-wrote it with my best friend, Coach Khan Apostolopoulos. You know, and even though the crisis has passed, I think challenges still exist with every one of us, and they exist on a daily basis. What we discovered was that when people face either a crisis or just call them challenges for right now, they typically fall into 4 categories, 4 personality types, or 4 ways of reacting to the challenge that they face. The first one, we call the victim. And the victim, of course, is, why is this happening to me? Poor me, right? And they get down, they get depressed, as if it's only happening to them and not 8 billion other people. That's another story, but that's number one. The second one is the critic. Now, the critic will blame everyone, the World Health Organization, the government, the president, their boss, their spouse, their kids. I mean, they just blame. They're into blaming. They get frustrated. They get angry. They're upset all the time. They're just miserable that way. The third one, we kind of call it the bystander. Basically, somebody off to the side, an observer, someone who's so overwhelmed by the changes that are taking place, and they feel so out of control, and they go into fear mode, kind of like the deer with the headlights look.
Yeah.
They're frozen. They just don't know what to do, so they don't do anything. And what all 3 of these personality types have in common is they don't move the needle forward in some kind of positive resolution, right? There's poor me, I get down depressed, I get mad, or I'm just in fear mode. And then we get to the fourth one, which was the premise of the book too, which we like to call the navigator.
Yep.
And navigators, of course, navigate whatever challenge they're facing in life in a masterful way. And they're not just surviving, but they're thriving in spite of the challenges. But before we jump to what do navigators do well and so successfully and what makes them, it's not like, well, Dr. Elia, I'm the navigator and you're the victim. It's not like that. All human beings have all 4 of those inside ourselves. That's my psychology hat now wearing. We all have that.
Yeah.
So a personal example in March of 2020, early on in the pandemic, all my speaking engagements throughout the world got canceled in 1 week. Email after email after email. Sorry to inform you, due to couldn't travel, right? So did I panic? Did I have the deer with the headlights look initially? I sure did. I'm like, what the heck? Like everything gone in
Yeah.
1 week. The whole year is gone.
Scary. Yeah.
And did I feel like a victim initially? I was supposed to speak in Barcelona in October of 2020. Never been to Barcelona. It's what on my bucket list. I was so excited to go. Canceled, of course. I mean, the conference happened, but it was on Zoom. Not the same as being live. Anyway, so. And did I have issues with the way things were being handled at the governmental level or worldwide and so on? I sure did. But if I stayed mad, the government, the president, the UN, whatever, for the next 6 months, who am I hurting?
Yeah. Totally.
Them or myself? So the point is not like, well, don't ever be a victim or don't ever get mad or whatever. No, that's human nature. Of course you're going to do those things, but do it for half an hour. Okay, do it for an hour if you really have to. Feel the feelings, get it out of your system, and then pivot
Yeah.
and switch to navigation mode. I had no plans to write a book in that year. None. My schedule was booked. I was happy to go. But when everything got canceled, this is what navigators do. They're very flexible and adaptable.
Mm.
So if I can't speak and travel and do my thing that I enjoy doing, what can I do? What do I control?
Mm.
Right? And navigators control their attitude.
Mm-hmm.
I could have stayed stuck. It's like poor me and sulked and done nothing for that whole year. Just gave up basically. It's like, or I'm like, okay, well that doesn't work. What can I do now? I have time now. So that's how the book came out. And the funny thing is, and this is why flexibility and adaptability is so important in life. I because as a result of the book, I ended up speaking to more people. Yes, it happened over Zoom.
Yeah.
50, 60,000 people that year, more than I ever have in my entire life. It happened in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know anything about Zoom prior to that because I like live events. But you got to be I know a lot of speakers, motivational speakers, refuse to switch. Like I'm, a big shot and I don't talk on the, this little camera up here. So they never did anything. And I'm like, no, this is just a new opportunity. It's good for me to learn something new. I'm not a technical person, but my kids helped me with Zoom initially. I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, the light, the information got out to people. I mean, I spoke 4 times in India,
Mm.
which is like, that's on my bucket list. I want to go and speak live in India now and reach people throughout the world. And I'm like, how great is that? Even
Yes.
in the middle of this great challenge that humanity faced, if we're open and flexible and adaptable, things happen. So navigators, the first thing that they do is they practice massive self-care.
Interesting.
For them, self-care is a non-negotiable, Tracy-Ann.
Mm.
It's non-negotiable.
Mm.
And I used to walk like 3 times a week prior to the pandemic because I'm older, because I have to, it's this, I have to, like, for an hour, 3 miles a day or whatever. When the pandemic hit and the stress level in my immediate family, extended family, we had kids and nephews like all over, they used to come, my clients, as my own stress level increased, I'm like, this isn't cutting it anymore.
Yeah.
So I started walking every day. Now, this was April of 2020. It's now 2024. So for the last 4.5 years, I don't miss a day. My walking every day is a non-negotiable. So my self-care has increased as a result of the stress increasing. And now I do it because I want to, not
Yeah.
because I have to.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And the other thing is, I used to always walk with my phone. Now, 50% of the time, it's not 100% of the time, but 50% of the time, I don't take my phone with me. And I do what I call my gratitude walk. So for a full hour, I look at the blue skies. I listen to the birds serenading me as I'm walking. I look at the little critters running around, rabbits and squirrels or whatever, and I just express gratitude to
Mm.
God, for my family, for the life and all that stuff. So I call it my gratitude walk, which fixes 2 things. Number one, I get my physical exercise, but number two,
Yes. Your mental.
now do an hour of gratitude. You know that you cannot be grateful and depressed at the same time simultaneously. That's physiologically impossible.
Yeah. I wanted to talk
Because
to you about this. It was one of my questions because I know this was fascinating to me. Okay. So just keep going because it was fascinating to me.
yeah, because when we're in a state of gratitude, we call up our drug dealer. Best drug dealer on the planet is the human brain, and he's free too. This brain free. When you're in a state of gratitude, what happens to your brain? You start releasing the chemicals.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, there's beautiful chemicals that brings you to a state of happiness, right? So
Right.
that's why physiologically you can't be depressed and uh, grateful at the same time. So the gratitude walk has multiple benefits. I would urge your audience to just try it for 1 week. You got
Yeah.
nothing to lose for the next 7 days, and don't take your phone with you if you can, unless it's an emergency. Go for a walk If it's half an hour, however long you want to walk, 15 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour, and start thinking about all the things that you're grateful for. And notice what happens to you after that 1 week.
Yeah,
I promise you, you'll be a different person.
totally. Yeah, and I know you've spoken about this gratitude and the depression. What advice do you have for someone who, you know, perhaps is burnt out, let's say, right? We've got a lot of people that are in leadership roles. Uh, it's very stressful. There's a lot of change and transformation going on. There's a lot of expectation. There's been a lot of layoffs in general. So,
Of course.
there's sort of, you know, the stress levels gone up, right? Gratitude might be a little bit down. I know this is something that you've spoken a lot about, and I think that you can help our audience in some ways. What are perhaps some of the things that our audiences can do to get their gratitude up? This is one of the areas, right? And get that depression down, because I think we're seeing a lot of burnout in corporate America right now. And you and I have spoken about that actually.
Yeah, and I'm not worked for the last 20 years. I work with senior leaders, C-suite, in organizations from Fortune 100 to startups to, with a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners. So what you're describing is spot on. Um, one of my, and you're from South Africa, right?
Yeah.
So we talked about this. So one of my, all-time role models is Nelson Mandela. I love the man. I love how he lived his life. I love, and one of his sayings, which I repeat to myself every single day, he said, in life, either you win or you learn,
Yes.
right? In other words, you don't lose. As long as you're learning something, then you're not losing. So given
Totally.
that we're all graduates from the University of Adversity, and we're going to face adversity, when it happens, and it's easy to get into the victim mode. Why is this happening to me? I've thought, what if we change that sentence just slightly?
Yeah.
What if we say, why is this happening for me?
Yes.
Because if it's happening to me, it brings me down. If it's happening for me, now we have a different discussion in the brain. Now the brain's go, why is this happening for me? Let's find out. And then we get curious, and eventually the lesson will come. Sometimes it comes faster than other times. Sometimes it takes a little digging, but the lesson does come. You and I have had some successes in our lives, right? For
Mhm.
sure. But when we look back, I can tell you the greatest lessons in my personal life have never come from my successes. The greatest
Absolutely.
lessons have come from what at the time appeared to be a setback, a
Yes.
loss, a mistake, a
Yeah.
human frailty, a weakness.
Absolutely.
So, but as the time went on, and you're able to look back and say, I know exactly why that happened to me, because I wouldn't be the person that I am today had that not happened to me. So therefore, now, when you're going through a challenge, it's easy for us to talk about right now, say, well, just look for the lesson, everything will be good. It's not that easy.
Yeah.
But if you can eventually get to that point, you first of all, you step out of the victim mode, the number one, you begin to navigate. And once you get that answer, like, man, I'm actually grateful that that happened, even though it was really tough going through it at the time.
Mhm.
But I'm really grateful that it happened because it's helped shape who I am, right?
I love that. I love that. And I always say to people, everything you do in life, no matter what it is an investment in yourself. You are learning, don't take that away, right? Don't take that away, because those hard lessons, they're just a moment in time. You will get through it, but that you've got to have that mental fortitude, right? To be able to get through it. It never feels good when you're going through it. Never, ever, right? But
Certainly not, of
it,
course.
you have to get through it. Now, there is something you had. Well, actually, before I go there, I want to talk about something else. So I speak to a lot of people that are not happy in their lives or have these big dreams, but they haven't quite accomplished them. I want to get your perspective on this, because I know you have one. How do we help people become unstuck? Let's just call it that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. First, the first and foremost is self-awareness.
Yeah,
Are you living the life that you are meant to live?
yeah,
are you living the life that you had hoped for when you were young, when you had dreams? Remember those dreams?
Yeah.
Or are you living somebody else's life in a lot of ways? So, first of all, we have to practice self awareness. We also have to be honest with ourselves and say, you know what? Yeah, there's some things in my life that are working. There's some other things in my life that are actually challenging, and then have the willingness and the courage to step outside of your comfort zone.
Yes.
Because a lot of times we start going down a certain path and then it becomes comfortable. That's how it is. And then we stay there for like 20, 30, 40 years
Yeah. Oh,
until
yeah.
there's a midlife crisis. Then we're like all of a sudden. So, and you know how many people I've had, especially senior leaders that hit that, in their 40s or 50s, they hit that midlife crisis. I started thinking about that. I'm like, why don't we have a midlife reflection
Mm.
before it becomes a crisis? Because a crisis, a reflection is preventative, right?
Mhm.
I can see where this, I can see where I'm headed, and I'm going to stop right now and pause and have this midlife or whatever period in your life you have a reflection. Is this the path that I want to be on? Because a midlife crisis is expensive,
Yeah.
financially, health wise, relationship wise, and so on, right? So, in unfortunately, we live in a crisis management type of society versus a preventative, right? So, awareness, honesty,
Mhm.
and then take action
Mm.
as a result of that.
I love
And
that.
then manifest the life that you want to live. Like, really, it's available that we can manifest whatever life we want to live. But it takes some effort. People say, well, you kind of live like this charmed life or these, lucky or easy, whatever. I'm like, maybe it's luck. But I've actually thought seriously, deliberately, consciously, and mindfully, how do I want to live my life, the rest of my life until I die?
Yeah.
It's not random. I put a lot of energy and thought to it. A lot of my walks, actually, when I'm not practicing gratitude, I think about, how do I want to live my life?
Yeah. I think that's a really important point, though, because when you think about that, you know, people may think, oh, Dr. Elia G, he just got lucky. Here's the thing, or he's just a fortunate man. Here's the reality. You have intentionally and deliberately created this beautiful life for yourself. Doesn't mean it doesn't have ups and downs and all those things, but you've created a beautiful life for yourself. So, on that note, I want to talk about a story that I heard you tell. Okay. You had an epiphany in Greece. Okay.
Yes.
You went to Greece. Uh, I want you to tell the story, but you were eating and
Yeah.
meeting people. Please tell everyone the story.
Yeah.
I love the story.
I will answer that, but before I go there, just so people can understand, I had a great family growing up. For the first 10 years, it was just like this happy home, and we had a great. And then tragedy struck. My mom gets cancer. This is in Greece, and back in the day, cancer was like a death sentence. And I was like, my mom was the greatest person I've ever met. Uh, so full of life, so full of love, unconditional love. My mom wasn't loved by men and women; she was beloved, which is
Mm,
different. She was just pure light, just pure like this. But as a result of that, our family gets uprooted. We live this great life that we had in Greece and moved to the United States, starting over. I mean, I'm a 10-year-old kid, very, very traumatic in a lot of ways.
yeah.
But in order to preserve her life, and there were other reasons why we came to America, but that was the biggest one. UCLA Medical Center, the best, the best of the best. That because had we stayed in Greece, I know my mom wouldn't have lived very long. And as a result of that, she ends up living another dozen years. So, but she eventually, her third metastasis, I mean, she passed away when I was 22, completely devastated me.
Mm,
Like my life was, my dad, who was in love with my mom, for 35 years, they met when they were 16, the great love story, is drinking even more, drinking, smoking. So I lost my mom physically. I lost my dad to his grief, which
mm,
I understand a lot more. My older brother, God bless him, he left and did his own thing too, in his own grief too. So I'm the youngest. So, I went from this great family, somebody threw a grenade in it and blew everything up.
mm,
It was so hard. I mean, but my mom's parting words, listen to this. The last thing she ever said to me were the following. She said, honey, says, don't worry about me. I'm going to be just fine. I just want you to be happy. End quote. This he fell into a coma and died 2 days later.
wow.
Um, so for the first year, after that. I mean, and I lost everything. I felt like my whole life ended. Not that I would commit suicide, but I had this thought. I would literally ask God, like, man, if I can get hit by a bus today, I'm good to go home. I just want to be with my mom. I couldn't imagine living another 50, 60, 70 years without, my mom on this planet.
Sure.
And interestingly enough, uh, in a couple of months, it'll be the 40th anniversary, 40 years since my mom passed away.
Wow.
And I miss her every single day. So for the first year, Tracy, I literally didn't want to wake up. I didn't want to get out of bed. Very unusual. I mean, that wasn't my nature.
Mm.
I was depressed. I was lost. I was 22 years old. Back then we didn't even have grief. I don't know if they were like, anyway, I didn't go to therapy. I didn't have anything. I somehow survived. I was purely survival mode. But on the 1 year anniversary, and the anniversaries are hardest in grief, especially with the first year when you lose a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
Her words came back to me. I remember her words again, which were, "Don't worry about me. I'm going to be just fine. I just want you to be happy." And I kid you not, something happened to my brain. And this is way before we knew about neuroplasticity and that the brain can create neural pathways. Something happened in my brain and something switched just like that. And I was like, Elia, the best way to honor mama is to be happy.
Yeah.
That has contributed as much as anything else for me, whatever, my happiness story and the happiness doctor, really. And I changed my path and I decided to go back to graduate school, and the rest is history in essence. So her words, and the love that my wife says, how do you love somebody people so big? I feel like I it's like a waterfall of love from heaven. I think my mom channels, like, it comes down through me and it comes out. That's why I say it's effortless. I don't even have to try to do that and to love people so big. Now, fast forward to your. So my point is, I've had tragedies in my life. I've had things that happened. My dad, unfortunately, in his grief, he never fully recovered.
Mm.
And but a dozen years after my mom died, he drowned in Greece in 5 inches of water. Like, he was swimming by himself. Something happened to him, and he literally fell head first. By the time people got him, turned him over, he was dead. And that was 2 weeks. I hadn't seen him in like a couple of years. So tragic, like, right, in a lot of ways.
Oh.
Love my dad, love my mom, but that's how life is. Not everything works out.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean I'm going to let those things define who I am and how I live my life.
Yes.
So now fast forward to the pandemic. And literally for 35 years, my older brother like, Elia, you should get a Greek passport. You never know when you might need it. And I'm like, nah, I don't need a Greek passport. So guess what happens? This is the weirdest thing. I finally, for whatever reason, 2019, I'm like, well, maybe I should listen to my brother. I get and I get the Greek passport. Then the pandemic hits and everything shuts down, and you couldn't get into Greece without a Greek passport. Like, so for the first time in my life, I leave my wife, kids, family, and so on, and I go to Greece by myself for 7 weeks in a quest to actually find myself. Because for all those years, I was always about taking care of everybody else. Like, and gladly, I don't regret that, but I never really got to spend time with me.
Yeah.
And what do I versus what you're supposed to do, right? And for 7 weeks, because I don't cook, I ate out in my whole, our home in our little village, Galaxy City, that my whole family goes back 250 years. That's where our home is, right on the water, beautiful. For 7 weeks, I ate out. That's 49 nights. In Tracy-Ann, I never ate alone.
Wow.
Think about 7 weeks. I always had company. Sometimes I was double booked. Hey, Elia, what are you doing tonight? Well, I'm having dinner with Mary. Oh, okay. We'll see you tomorrow night. I walk everywhere because I parked my car because you walk everywhere. I would go to the bakery, everything fresh fish, fresh food, the Mediterranean diet, the best food in the world, healthiest. I swam twice a day. I got totally bronzed like a kid. Like, I went back to my youth, like, very hedonistic life in a lot of ways. But more importantly, I connected with people and friends and extended family that I've been, for 50 years. We go back. Such rich history. So then, I get on the plane to fly back home, and I'm like, wait a minute. I forgot how great life can be. And I came home and I told my wife, I'm like, listen, for the rest of our lives, I want to be spending not my token 2 weeks every month, every year, going to Greece. I'm going to be spending in Greece/Europe 3, 4, 5 months every year. That's how I want to live my life. Are you with me? And fortunately, she said yes. And so for the last, 4 or 5 years, we've been going there 3, 4 months. Greece/Europe. We use Greece, and then and then we come back and we go back. Anyway, how did that happen? Because I consciously thought about it. I'm like, this is what I want. This is how I want to live my life. So how can I make that happen? And because of Zoom and because of the technology and everything that happened with working remotely, they call them digital nomads, right? I
Mhm.
became one of them. I
Yeah.
can still be in Greece or somewhere in Europe and still do my coaching and still do my work and still do the podcast and my lectures and so on. So it's doable. It's taking some creativity, but my point is people can design their lives. I mean, like I'm a walking, living example of doing something very different, getting outside of the comfort zone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when life is comfortable, it's that's why they call it the comfort zone. It's comfortable, but is it our best life? Sometimes the comfort, I think, robs us of when we step outside of our comfort zone, we can have something even greater.
Oh, I
And I'm
agree.
so, you know,
I was just going to say, I really believe that. I really believe that in my heart. That's why I love that story. And one of the things you speak about when you spoke about that story was, if not now, when? When?
right, right. And when what happens to you when you lose your parents young? I never have I never think about I'm going to grow old because I don't know what that's like.
Yeah.
In a few years, I'm going to pass my dad. I've already left my mom behind years and years ago. She died when she was 51. It's a weird thing when you outlive your parents. It's a very, very strange thing. But I know that the best way to honor both of them, of course, is to spend time in my home country in Greece and to be with those childhood friends and cousins and the people that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good life. It's not a perfect life. Of course, there are you have to make adjustments all the time. Um, but I just decided to go for it.
Yeah, but it's a
Life
rich
is
life. It's a rich life. I love what your grandpa said. I mean, I think that is so true. It's a rich life of quality, right? In having deep, impactful relationships, impacting other people's lives. That is, I think, as social human beings, as creatures, that is something that is in all of us and gives us. We live a life of meaning when we live a life like that, right?
Yeah, and if you look at blue zones, these five
Yeah.
places on the planet that people live in. Ikaria, the island of Ikaria in Greece is one of them. Okinawa, Japan is another one.
Costa
Costa
Rica.
Rica,
Yeah.
of course, Loma Linda in California. Yeah, there's Sardinia and Italy. Those are the five blue zones, right? Where people live significantly longer than others, and happily so. What are some of the things that define them? And that's pretty universal across these five different places, right, on our planet. Um, Social connectivity,
Yes.
connecting with people, um, eating healthy food,
Yeah.
farm to table in a lot of ways, moderate exercise, whether you swim or you hike or you walk, a little bit of wine every day, not a lot, but just these small things that we can all do and live a good life. So I don't think I have to be in Sardinia or in Okinawa for me to live a good life. I think I can do it in my own circumstances to the best of my ability
One
and
absolute.
to live a good life.
Yeah.
And also to be an example to others. Say, man, if you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah. 100%. You actually, it's funny you spoke about your mom. So my mom, she was in South Africa and I had moved to the States. And the only question my mom ever asked me until the day she couldn't anymore was, "Are you happy?" That was
I
all my
know.
mom cared about. All she cared about was that I was happy. And
You know what? Yeah, go ahead.
no, it's just like when you said that, I had to share that with you because my heart, it's the most amazing thing as a parent. You, in fact, I'd love you to tell that story. Like that is what parents want for their children, right?
I mean, yeah, when I travel and I speak, it doesn't matter what country I'm in. Before I start my talk, I always ask the audience the following questions: like, if you were to ask any parent, regardless of nationality, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, religious affiliation, gender, sexual orientation, it doesn't matter, any parent, what would you like for your children? I just want them to be,
Happy.
and then I take the mic and then like happy.
Yeah.
So that's a universal thing. So why is it so easy for us to say that about our kids and grandkids and so on, people we love? Shouldn't that also be the case for ourselves,
Yes.
right?
It's a good question.
Eh, that's right. But there's a gap though. We want that for our kids. We want that, so easy, right? It's the easiest question to answer. Just like your mom said to you every time she called you, honey, are you happy, right? My mom on her dying, bed, the same thing with me. But how come we don't embrace it the same way when it comes to ourselves? Like even with self-care, people say, well, isn't self-care kind of selfish? I'm like, yes, and do more. I double down. Like, if you think it's selfish, do more, because I don't know anybody that practices so much self-care that they're like, oh, too much self-care, I gotta like go to work. Nobody says that. We're always in deficit of self-care. So
Yes.
do it and do more. And because selfishness has a negative connotation, but the way that I mean it, of course, it's like, no, take care of yourself, because if you don't, who will,
Well,
right?
the way I always look at it, it's like, when you get on the plane and they say,
Yes,
put your oxygen mask on first and then help someone else. Why are they saying that? They're saying that because if you don't put your oxygen mask on, you can't help someone else. I look at self
exactly.
care in exactly the same way. If you don't care, if you don't care, take care of yourself, you're not able to help anybody else because you don't have the energy, you don't have the desire, you're depressed. All those things happen because you're not taking care of yourself. So I'm just a firm believer that that's the fact of the matter is that self-care is actually in many ways actually selfish and selfless.
A- And I want to address specifically women right now, because in my private practice, I would say 70% of the people that came to saw me were women, and just in my experience, amazing women, nurturing women, kind women, women of service to others. However, neglectful to themselves. That was the story that I heard over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Taking care of everybody else, but
Hmm.
neglecting to take care of themselves, which of course would lead to all kinds of issues, not just depression, but anxiety, depression, all kinds of things, and then
Oh,
eventually would lead to physical symptoms and physical illnesses too. Because when that happens, is the body's talking to you. It's like, are you listening? And
yeah,
if you're not listening, I'm going to increase the pressure.
yeah,
The diagnosis is going to get harder until I get your attention. Again, we don't want to go into the crisis. I'm all about prevention. So pay attention
yeah,
and practice as much self-care as you can, and do it on a daily basis. To me, it's a non-negotiable. It's not like, well, should I do it? No, I'm going to go for my walk every day, no matter what, at
yeah. And
least.
I'm going to tell you, that's only something I started doing uh, way later in my life.
Same
But
here. I didn't used to do that. Absolutely.
yeah,
Same.
but you get a couple of wake up calls, right? When you get sick, you realize, uh, well, how am I going to be any good to anybody, if I can't even help them? So you realize that, unfortunately, for many women, I think, just as you said, it takes that kind of sickness or something like that to get them to realize that self-care is really important. I mean, I came from a mom who was a people pleaser. I became a people pleaser. It was, so it's this generations and generations of always taking care of others, uh,
Yeah.
but it is important to take care of yourself because you can't take care of others if you are physically and mentally completely depleted.
Yeah. And that was my experience. Amazing women, great women in every except in taking care of themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I would give him homework assignment like, okay, turn the kids over to your husband, go into the master bedroom, lock the bathroom door, and take a bubble bath with some candles for an hour. I don't care if the house is on fire. You never come out. I don't care if the kids are screaming. Let your husband deal with it.
It's
They're
okay.
like, I don't know about that. I'm like, this is your homework. I'm going to see you next week. You better have done at least one of those.
All
you
right. So
know.
we are coming to the end here, but I have one last question and then I have some fun questions for us. So,
Okay.
what advice, Dr. Elia, just with all that's going on, in corporate America and with leaders and all the stuff that we have going on, what advice do you have for leaders out there today?
I think leaders. Yeah. So here's the quote, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson, one of the greatest
Love
writers of
you.
all time, said, amazing. He said the following. He said, "Your actions speak so loudly, I cannot hear a word you're saying."
Mm,
So as a leader, and I wrote an article a while back for the Huffington Post, happy leaders equals happy teams.
mhm.
In other words, you can't say, "Oh, I'm all for my employees and employee engagement, and let's make sure their employees are taken care of, and our people come first, and the most important asset we have are our people and blah," and then not live your own life that way.
Yeah.
So you have to walk the talk. You have to be authentic as a leader. You have to practice your own self care. You can't be asking everybody else in your company or your organization to do it if you're not doing it, and they see that.
Yeah.
So you're up there, everybody's watching you, walk the talk,
Love it.
invest in yourself. And of course, as we know, happy employees impact the bottom line.
Yes, they do.
There's so many benefits to happy employees. The funny thing is that when I started doing executive coaching, when I transitioned out of a clinical psychologist, this was before all the Harvard, Forbes, and all the Gallup and all the big studies. So I used to share with, C-suite, you know what? Happy employees, I'm telling you, and they're like, Dr. Elia, you're a really nice guy. We like you. You don't know what the hell you're talking about. I pay those people and I get to work. that was like, that was back then, like 20 years ago. Now it's a lot easier, of course, because why? Happy and engaged employees. First of all, do you know that happy employees are physically healthier,
Yeah.
meaning they have less from work because they're healthier physically. They don't have to go to the doctor because they're taking care of themselves. That's number one. Number two, they're more creative. They're more innovative.
Yeah.
Um, they're better teammates. People have said, okay, well, I understand the other one. Why do you say that happy employees are better teammates? And it goes back to your oxygen story. Because if my batteries are full every day and I show up at work and I see that, Jane is really struggling, I'm going to reach out to Jane because because I'm in a good place.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'm a better teammate
Yes.
to my colleagues. That's number one. Um, they're more productive. Um, Greater retention. They're happy at work, so they stay there. So there's less turnover, and we know how expensive that gets for our organizations. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars just to replace one employee.
Yeah.
They're great ambassadors. They're much better than your marketing department because they are happy where they're working. They start recruiting their friends, like, "Hey, you should come and work with this company. We have a great culture. I love working here."
Yeah.
All of those things impact the bottom line. So if you're a senior leader, invest in your people, but also invest in yourself and watch what happens to the bottom line. I mean, there's no question about that.
Yeah.
That's what I do. When I come to organizations, they bring me in. It's like, okay, our culture needs some help. I'm like, okay, let's get to work.
Yeah.
That's it.
Absolutely. Great, great, great advice. All right. Okay. Well, there's that sound. So I've got some fun questions for you.
Okay,
All
go.
right.
I'm
So,
ready.
first off, if you were an animal, what animal would you be?
Well, that's easy. A dolphin. I was a national champion in Greece, a swimmer, and in the United States.
Huh.
So I used to swim the butterfly a lot. So people used to say, "Well, you swim like a dolphin." And here's the thing. And I'm heading to Greece in a couple of weeks. When I go to Greece, the first time I dive into the Mediterranean, and I dive in before I come up for air, and I have a deep dive. I go under. I say to myself and to the universe, I'm like, I release all the stress of the past year. And by the time my head literally comes up above water, I'm a different person. And I have done this for the last 40 years.
Wow.
I can't wait. Like I cannot wait to dive in that water and just release all the stress. So yeah, dolphin would be by far.
I love
Plus,
dolphins.
I love dolphins. I've swam with dolphins. They're magical creatures,
They're magic
beautiful and playful.
creatures. Oh, yeah. Magical creatures. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So, next question. Favorite family traditions?
By the way, we actually believe in traditions in our family. And it's kind of funny when you raise your kids and then they leave and so on. And we start like, well, you're too old for that. They come back and like, no, we got to do it. Why? There's something about that continuity, right?
Yeah.
So on every New Year's Day for the last, like, well, my brother and I used to do this when we were kids. So this is a tradition that we passed on. We watched the same movie. And there's this movie called The Great Race by Blake Edwards.
Yeah.
He did the Pink Panther. And it's with, Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis and Natalie Wood. And it's this absurd, this great race, basically. It's a comedy. It's hilarious. My brother and I growing up, we could pretty much tell you word for word every scene. Now my kids are doing the same thing. And now we're starting to have the grandkids starting to watch the Great Race. So that's our tradition. And we skipped one year. We couldn't get together. And the kids got so upset. It's like, Dad, when are we going to watch the Great Race? So that's a family tradition that's, and we know that we've seen it like 2 dozen times.
Yeah.
And yet, so we're sitting on the couch, we're eating popcorn, and we start saying, we know the script inside and out. So one will say what's coming up in the next 5 seconds. I'll reply back. We kind of go back and forth. And it's this, fun connecting and spending time together and laughing together. And of course, that's a great family tradition for us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's so fantastic. Well, Dr. Elia, it's so wonderful to spend such a nice chunk of time with you and to learn from you. I know that our audience got probably so many pearls and nuggets of wisdom. So thank you so much. And to all of those in the audience, please, we will have Dr. Elia Gorgaris' information. It'll be out there. We will also be putting this out on LinkedIn, so look out for that as well, out on Instagram.
And Instagram.
Please connect with him. Please make sure that you're following him because there are so many more nuggets, certainly that I've learned over the last few months from him, and I know that you will too. So again, Dr. Elia, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you. My pleasure. It's such a joy to be with you today.
And just don't forget, for all of our audiences out there, together we can make a difference.
And just one last statement. Do not procrastinate your happiness. Live your best life now.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way, for they may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at Tracy_Ann Palmer.
And Stacy Castor _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner, waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And this is Tracy-Ann Palmer. And be the change you wish to see in the world.